Hey, everybody. Welcome to the PROformance Podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Glazier. This week, I'm here not with a coach, but with an athlete, Strauss Mann, a professional goalie. And I think he played over in Germany this last year, but he plays professional. Went to Michigan, was a captain, was Big Ten goalie of the year. And a guy I've come across with, just working at some of the gyms that I've trained out says, Strauss, I appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule this off season, taking the time to sit down with me, man.
Yeah, Ryan, thanks so much for having me. It's good to chat from time to time, and I love going on podcasts and talking about my experiences. And yeah, I know you'll have a lot of good questions, and we'll have some good conversations. So I'm pumped.
Yeah. I think, dude, your journey is just very interesting. And there's just so many ways to go, play pro at all sports, right? And I think like for me, we came across each other in like from 2018 to 2021, 2022. And that was kind of like right when you went from juniors to college and then started playing pro. And so I thought it was really cool for me to have that outside perspective, but I really want to know more just being a hockey guy myself and not knowing the ropes and not knowing what to do. I think you have a lot of valuable information, man. So, talk to me first off about youth hockey, like where you grew up, how'd you start playing, and your journey along that line.
Yeah, so I mean, first of all, looking back on the time that we spent together, it is pretty cool to think about those years, and it was definitely a fun few years and unexpected few years in terms of the climb I had from high school to college. So you definitely had a unique perspective into my journey, which I feels like a long time ago currently. And yeah, just going back a little bit, I grew up in Greenwich, Connecticut, not too far from Prentice, probably about a 20-minute drive. So I was really fortunate to have that in my backyard. And at the tail end of high school, start to, create a relationship with the gym, with Ben, with Rob, and all of you guys. And that place really helped me along my journey. Yeah, I grew up, my parents didn't play hockey or anything. It's obviously pretty big out east, but just had a couple friends that played it, and I wanted to be like them. And um, kind of one of those things. I got on the ice and fell in love with it, and slowly fell in love with goaltending. And through the years, did the whole youth hockey team, kind of bounced around from some different places. And towards the tail end, like I said, I played for my high school while I was at Prentice training there, and I was at Brunswick prep school out east that has really grown since I've been there, which is cool to see. A lot of players going Division 1 from there and even into pro. But when I was there, it was very few guys to look up to. So it's really cool to see that. And anyways, yeah, just going back, I didn't really have my opportunity to be a starting goalie there until my senior year. That's just kind of how it played out with the goalies in front of me, and I was able to make the most of that year, and I felt really prepared for it. But you still never know what's going to happen when you land one shot. So had a good senior year, and then was able to go to nationals with my split season team at Fairfield. We won nationals. Then went out to USHL camps and was able to make it out of camp, undrafted. Thought I was probably going to end up in the all, but just found a really great opportunity, kind of made the most of it, and shortly after went to Michigan, committed that year from the USHL. So, like I said, I mean, we can dive into that a little bit more, but like I said, it was a quick rise and kind of unexpected one, given that I hadn't even really played a high school hockey game or started one until I was about 17 or 18 years old.
Wow. That's pretty late. Usually you see a lot of these guys that do really well or go play pro, they're like usually starting out of the gate, right?
For
Um,
sure.
so with you playing, I know you said you played mid Fairfield. They have a really good tier one program. Did you start out playing tier one or did you play a little bit of tier two and then start to make that next jump? What'd that look like?
Yeah, I played tier two till I was probably 12 or 13, and then I jumped to Westchester Express, actually, was where I first made that jump. I forget who I was telling the other day, but the story of that, it was kind of fun looking back on that time because that's going to tier one. Every step in your journey matters a lot, including the lows. But this was definitely an early high. Was I grew up playing at the Grand Skating Club, tier two, and nothing but good things to say about it. But it's not the top of the top for youth hockey. And then getting to go to Westchester Express, I remember making it out of tryouts kind of unexpectedly, and then I felt like I was in this whole new group of players and guys and people that were talking about prep schools and college, and I was like, whoa, okay, things changed. I'm losing track of your question a little bit, but it wasn't until later that I joined with Fairfield for like just that split season. Played a little bit of Connecticut Junior Rangers as well in that time, just as a goalie, and it still is really even in pro, just trying to find a spot to play. That's the first thing. Like you
Yeah.
obviously want to be in the best league and the best team with the best facilities and coaches, and at the end of the day, if you're not playing, it's not so good.
Yeah. And especially being a goalie, it's like there's what every team you have two goalies that dress, and then you might have a third or fourth there as sitting in the stands just in case. So it's definitely the odds of being a professional goalie are a lot slimmer than playing player, right? But when you made that jump from tier two to tier one, was it anything different like the summer before that you changed, or were you just getting more exposure to higher level players? Like, what was the biggest difference in your game from that tier two year to the tier one year?
Yeah, it was honestly it was so long ago and I was so young. I'd love to sit here and say I changed my diet or my sleep or something, but I was like 12 or 13 years old, probably 13 at the time, and it just felt like I was ready to make that jump. I felt like I was one of the better players in tier two on my team and knew some of the guys in tier one. Some friends had already made that switch, and it just felt like a good time at that point in my, I don't want to say career because I was still so young, but while I was playing, it just felt exciting to me and thought I'd give it a try. You know, you make the team, it's hard to turn down. But there's moments like that at every point. It wasn't just at 12 or 13. It's in high school and college and still the pro. I think there's always little moments where you're trying to make the next step. And um, every time I think it's going to be a completely different thing that gets you to the next level. What got you there when you're 18 trying to get committed to college is going to be something completely different when you're 26 trying to learn how to manage things in pro hockey. So I think that's a really
Yeah.
important thing that I didn't really fully understand until now.
Yeah. And I remember specifically for me growing up playing youth hockey, that 14-year-old age group was like when you played 14 and then 15s, that's where you really start to see some people kind of step away from the pack and just have a little bit higher level play. And so that's when you kind of realize like at least for me, I was like, what do I want to do with hockey long term? Do I have the skill set and the work ethic to go to whatever level I want to go to. So, with you playing, so you played tier one for like 4 or 5 years. You went to Brunswick. Did you go to Brunswick all 4 years?
I went to Brunswick for 7 actually because it's a K through 12 school. So
Mhm.
I always loved hockey. I mean, when I moved there in 6th grade, I already knew, I wanted to play at Brunswick and in
Mhm.
high school, but nothing's guaranteed. I wasn't necessarily recruited there for that. I mean, maybe they knew I was a hockey player, but at that age, it's you got a while to go. So it was really about for me paving a path that worked at Brunswick. I considered leaving just because there were so many goalies in front of me. But I'm happy I stuck it out, obviously, and just made the most of that one year that I really had to show what I could do.
Yeah. And I think too, what sets Brunswick apart too is there's not a lot of recruiting. There's not a lot of people coming out of town to play, right? It's usually majority local Connecticut guys that are playing for that team. I remember when I went to boarding school, like all of our half our team was Canadian, and then everybody else was all over the place. So I think it's really cool that Brunswick and is able to kind of foster that kind of culture where you have all these good players want to stay there and play. So, so you graduated Brunswick. Did you know what you were going to do? You're like for the next year for hockey. Did any coaches talk to you about playing juniors or anything like that?
Yeah, so when I started at Brunswick my senior year, I played split season, like I said, with Mid Fairfield, and we had a whole season kind of before the season. going to tournaments up in Boston and whatnot. And there were some colleges that reached out, D3 colleges. I had an offer from Wesleyan actually to go in the next year without playing juniors. And for some reason for me, even though my coaches thought I was absolutely crazy, I just wanted to give the juniors thing a try. I was like, worst case, I go to juniors, I can still go the D3 route. People used to say you had to waste your life or time, and I just think that's garbage. That's not true, especially if you're using your time wisely and you're doing it for the right reasons. Yeah, if you go out there and just play Xbox all day and don't try, yeah, maybe it's a waste of your life, but you're probably going to do that in college anyways. So I was really committed to it. And I thought, what an experience that would be to go somewhere brand new in the Midwest and live an experience you could probably never live for the rest of your life. So I turned down the Wesleyan thing and yeah, it was like, all right, I'm going to go to juniors and see what happens here. And like I said earlier, there were null teams that were kind of interested, especially after the nationals in Fairfield, and we won nationals. And I was also looking at some USHL camps, even though there wasn't huge interest there. But I went to Muskegon's camp, played pretty well, didn't make the team, got cut at the end. And then Fargo called and said they needed a goalie for the next year. And if I came to the camp, I would have a real shot if I played well to maybe, you know, get a spot or at least get a spot in their training camp the next fall. So I wasn't planning on doing it. I was already honestly pretty exhausted from the whole spring of nationals to went to some null teams to visit and then went to this camp in Muskegon and I was like, you know what, why not? And I'm obviously happy I did because I ended up making that team. And yeah, the rest was kind of history.
Yeah. And then did you have like an advisor or anything? Because that was the one thing I didn't know even existed until I was at Prentice and training a lot of these youth guys all have like advisors or people like telling like that know the process and like kind of showing them which way to go. Did you have one of those?
I didn't, I mean, not an official one. I had some really great coaches, goalie coaches that I trusted, Steve Alcat, Nolan Schaefer, guys like that. That are local, play in the NHL, have been through it. So they're really the guys I leaned on for advice. In
Yeah.
terms of an advisor, a lot of people do. I have nothing bad to say about having one. I don't think people need to panic when they don't have one necessarily. So yeah, for me, I didn't have an advisor until my freshman year at Michigan. I was like, I'm here. I should probably get one now.
Yeah.
Because everyone else had one, but every path's different. And for me, especially because of the really great relationships I had with some coaches and their experience and the value they provided, it just wasn't really something that I needed.
Yeah. And I think too, when you have good coaches like that, that are a little bit that played pro or, have at least some kind of network with other coaches, and you're the one that's showing up and, when the time comes, you're playing really well and people can rely on you. I think that's easy for other coaches to just be like, yes, Strauss is the guy. Like he's focused. I recommend him to whoever, right?
Yeah, and like that's a good point because agents and advisors, whatever you want to call them, they're obviously they want the best for their guy because they profit off of them. But if you do have a coach that can back you or say good things about you, it probably goes a lot further in that sense because they don't have so much money in the game. And definitely I've maybe benefited from that. And still there's, yeah, the agents are there for a reason. They know a lot, they have connections. And when you do get to a certain point into college, into pro, you definitely, for the most part, need them.
When you were back up before your senior year, what did you tell yourself and what kind of mindset did you have in order to just, hey, I'm gonna wait it out. Once my opportunity comes, I'm going to crush it. How did you approach that?
Yeah, I mean, I was young, like 16, 17, and then 18, I finally started as a senior. I like to say that I, had a mind of steel and it was super easy because I just knew it was going to happen. But that's not the case. I think it's good to normalize the fear and the uncertainty. I was freaking out a lot. Like I said, I was talking to my parents if I should leave and go elsewhere. My junior year of high school, I literally toured Michigan as a student because I was like, maybe this hockey thing won't work out. Um, so it was tough. Like it was hard and hard to be patient. I lost a little bit of belief in myself too because I had, today if I have a bad season, like I've put in enough good seasons where I know I can still go out there and change the script the next game or the next year. back then you don't have much of a record to go off of. So it was tough mentally, but I going back to the coaches thing, like I had some really good coaches in my circle and some mentors in my circle that really believed in me. And from practice and from the games I had played, they thought I was, good enough. And for me, that's what I held on to. I like to say, like, I never was really trying to prove people wrong. It was more for me proving people right. I felt like I had some people that really believed in me, and I wanted to go out there and kind of show them that they were right, and that I deserved their belief. So it was kind of day by day, and I did have light at the end of the tunnel in terms of seeing, there was going to be a year there for me, hopefully, if I just did my job as a backup junior year, and I played well junior year, so I knew they weren't going to bring anyone in senior year, and um, it wasn't a lot of time, but I at least knew I'd have that one shot. So that was huge for me in terms of just knowing that there was it wasn't a permanent thing. Like there was something in the future to look forward to, which I think it's an important thing in life in general.
Yeah, I think it's kind of lost these days with social media, how everything's just so quick, and it's really hard to see that goal or see your progress play out longer than you want it to, right? So,
Mm.
okay. Do you think did you do a lot of ice lessons in strength training while you were coming through youth and playing juniors?
Yeah, definitely the on ice side. A lot of these coaches I've been talking about were goalie coaches, and I'd say from the time I was a kid, I did a lot of goalie lessons with a guy named Ryan Hall, who's super helpful to give me that foundation in my game. That how it is when you're young, you need to be building that mile in those circuits, and he really helped me get a great foundation in my game. And then when I was about 13, I met Steve Alcat, a former Rangers player, now announcer for the Rangers, and um, he gave me some new ways of thinking, new things to add to my game. But he was also just such a mentor to me in the work ethic aspect and in that belief aspect, and just being a pro before you're a pro. And um, yeah, I just definitely put a lot of time in and making sure my habits were really good. And I think that's an important thing. Like, there's always something you can do, whatever your circumstance is. You're always able to improve yourself. Whether you're playing a lot of games, that's great. You get a lot of reps. For me, I wasn't at times, and I was able to really just focus on those habits and getting good habits. And like you said, also in the gym, when I was probably like 15 or 16, started taking advantage of that. And then eventually went to apprentice and learned how to take care of my body the right way, whether it was, just weight training or the way I ate, the way I slept, and kind of, getting that 360 holistic way of looking at things. And obviously, that was a long time ago, but I'm grateful that I started so early because I've learned so many new things since then.
Yeah. What do you think was better for you for your performance, the lessons or the gym?
Ah, that's a good question. Um, I'd say the lessons, just because, at the end of the day, the sport is the sport, and like I could be the strongest, most flexible person on the planet, but if I never put a rep in on the ice, like you're not gonna be able to do much. Or on the other hand, you've seen some guys in the NHL that don't look like, they lifted a weight in their lives, but they've got something on the ice, these intangible assets that aren't so easy to teach. So I would both are important, but the on ice I'd say is important, more
Yeah,
important.
I would say I'd agree that a lot of the really good players in the professional level don't love the gym, and they're just because they see the ice different, they have a little bit higher IQ, so the game's a little bit slower for them, and so they don't need the extra strength or power or speed that they might, get in the off season in the gym, right? So we graduate Brunswick, we go to the USHL camp, you make Fargo. What was the biggest difference from playing prep school to playing that juniors in the USHL?
Yeah, it was definitely a big jump. Obviously, everyone in the USHL is pretty much a Division 1 hockey player, or will be obviously soon. And it was big. I remember some days in practice, especially the beginning, just being like, "Whoa, these shots are, harder than I thought," and the skill level, the speed of the game, and the intensity of that like pro way of looking at things. You go from being a full-time student and at a pretty good academic school at Brunswick to you're expected to show up early in the morning at the rink. You have 2.5 hour practices and training camp, games on the weekend, and you're a pro at 18, 19 years old. So for me, that was exciting because I felt like I really already flipped that switch to approaching the game that way, at least in my mind, that all in mentality. So that was a really fun thing to do for years, just focus on the game and put school aside for a second. And yeah, from the hockey side of things, it was hard at times. I got off to a really good start, which was helpful mentally. I think it quieted a lot of those doubts. I could really imagine if, the start hadn't gone so well that I would have really started to spiral, given my state of mind at that time being a little bit more anxious and not as confident in myself, like I said. But I was able to have a good first start, good first couple games, and I think I was like 9-1 in my first 10 games. So there was obviously a certain sense of confidence that came with that, and I think that was important for me because whether I should or shouldn't have, I needed a little bit of that external validation at the time, and that gave it to me.
What the schedule look like since you didn't have school?
Yeah, oh my gosh, it was like 8 years ago now, so I'm like going back to it, but it was yeah, it was like pretty similar to pro schedule, probably practices around 10 or something like that. We'd have lifts probably 2 or 3 times a week. If we played Friday, Saturday, maybe Monday and Wednesday, we lifted in the morning before. So you got to be there at something like 8 or 9 and then go to practice after. And obviously depends on the coach, depends on the team. But for us, we practiced really hard. We were big on, we obviously had flow drills and things at the beginning, but then a lot of team systems, a lot of small area games. And it's good because we're still so young. Like, obviously, we need to do that stuff in pro hockey too, but at a certain point, your game is going to be your game. And when you play a 60 to 82 game schedule, like a lot of it is just keeping your body fresh and the games are really where you want to have all your output. But when you're, like I said, that young, 18 or 19 years old, there's still so much development to be had. So I think the coaches there really enjoy that part of the game. And we're just trying to soak it all in and learn what it takes to make that next step because everybody there is there for a reason and also there to continue their hockey career.
Were there any like extra resources that Fargo had for you? Like, because the goal when you're playing the USHL, a lot of people want to go play D1 or just play college in general. Were there any, did they have any kind of like programs or just like they pass down any knowledge or just give you a hand on like how to navigate that?
Yeah, I mean it's crazy because you go there and you're kind of expected to know a lot of the stuff on your own. It really does flip that switch to that pro mindset. And they're so used to obviously like having these kids there. So on the administrative side, I guess they have someone that takes care of all the housing and things like that. And when it comes to the colleges, they're definitely probably the first coaches that a D1 college will call if they want to hear more about the kid and the player they're after. So they're definitely in communication, probably more the assistant coaches and the head coaches about colleges that are looking at you and interested. So that was definitely a big part of it. Also, a lot of the going into the year. So there's certain excitement in that, and I think on the coaches side too, and trying to help guys who are uncommitted get committed throughout the year.
Yeah. Did you like send any tape to anybody or were they just like
Mm.
they would watch your games and or they come to your games and then they'd want to reach out to you?
Yeah, in the USHL, it's just so heavily scouted that I think at that point it was mostly, yeah, just watching live or I don't know if they had like the tape online. Now it's so easy to get game tape wherever you are. But yeah, I think that was kind of a non-issue just because it was the USHL and the top league for that. If I'd gone to the Null, maybe would have had to try a little bit harder for sure, especially not having an advisor.
Yeah. And then how did Michigan snag you up and get really, really lucky? How'd they find you?
Um, yeah, it was always my dream school growing up, to be honest, and I didn't really think I had a shot at it being from the East Coast. It's just so hard to get seen by those Big Ten schools, or at least was when I was there. And I had a couple offers from schools not as big at that time, and I kind of leveraged it and said to Michigan, "Hey, like I have a couple offers. If you need a goalie, come take a look." And had a mentor at the time. He called them to and I think said some good things. And they came and watched my game at NTDP when we played the USA team. played a really great game. I toured the school that weekend and they offered me that Sunday. It was like the
Jeez.
craziest thing ever, but it happened all so fast. And I think I took the offer that day too. I was so pumped.
That's quick. I mean, sometimes that's how it happens, though. It's just timing, and then, hey, like this guy's available. People want him. So sometimes that helps raise your stock too, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Cool. And then, so we played, how many years did you play at Michigan?
Yeah, so I was there for 3 seasons. And then I left after my junior year to turn pro and went out to Europe to Sweden. So yeah.
Yeah. And then within those 3 years, you were a captain, which as a goalie and in college, very rare. You were Big Ten goaltender of the year. What was the biggest difference in making that jump from juniors to college to that prepared you for, fulfilling those roles?
Juniors to college was an interesting one because in a lot of ways it was a similar level in terms of the USHL being so talented and having so many D1 commits there. And at the same time, it was a big jump because the Big Ten is so good in Division I college and also older players, of course, and team systems were different. My team in Fargo in the USHL was super tight defensively, which helped me as a goalie. And going to Michigan, we were a little bit more loose, I guess you could say, more offensively minded. And it was a tough transition. I struggled for sure my freshman year, and but it was good. It was a good part of my journey that made me kind of double down and had a long off season that year as you do in college, and was able to make some changes that really helped my game. So I'm actually really grateful for that year, even though it was not easy at the time.
Well, after you played Michigan, or it might have been during Michigan, you played for Team USA, correct?
Yeah, it was right after. So I played in Sweden my first year pro, and the Olympics happened that year, and the NHL dropped out because of COVID. And so they were kind of taking guys from college and some of the top leagues in Europe, and I kind of was somewhat in between, having just come out of college and playing pretty well at Michigan, and then I had been playing well in Europe at the time. So I was grateful that I was on their radar and I was able to do that, which I obviously had no idea was something that would be possible going into that year.
Yeah. Did they give you a call? They email you? They text you? What did it kind of look like?
I believe it was a text. Yeah, I believe the GM of the team, Beezer, they call him. He shot me a text. That was a pretty special one. I called everyone I knew and told them.
Yeah, that was cool because I think didn't you play with like John Hayden on that team as well?
Hayes was actually, it was later that year. We went back to Worlds together.
Okay.
So there was the Olympics, and then they invited me to Worlds, which is happening right now in Stockholm. It's usually in Europe every year. So Olympics were in Beijing, and then a couple months later went to Worlds in Finland that year, and that's where Hayes, because he was with Buffalo, I believe at the time, Sabres, and he got invited. So we were able to connect, and obviously he's a Greenwich guy, so we knew each other, but not super well because of the age difference. But having played together those couple weeks, we bonded, and now we're definitely still in touch and good friends.
Yeah. And then most guys playing, I would say a handful of guys playing Division I hockey have been previously drafted before they even play, right? And so how do you how did you navigate not being really on anyone's radar? You weren't drafted to a NHL team, which sometimes it's a better argument not to get drafted because then you don't have your rights taken away for a certain team, or not your rights taken away, but your whenever you get drafted, you though they own your rights for like what, 3 years.
Yeah,
So
it can be more
yeah,
depending on the situation for sure.
yeah. So how did you choose to go overseas in Europe versus um, actually just leave it there? How did you choose to go overseas?
Yeah, it was a complicated situation. COVID hit. There were so many contracts being given out in the NHL. Some things were going on at Michigan with the coach there that I won't dive into too much, but it just was kind of the right time for me to make that change to pro. And Yeah, I didn't necessarily have Europe on my radar at that time. I was looking to hopefully get an NHL contract out of college, and it slowly became clear that probably wasn't going to be able to happen off the bat, and I could wait a little bit longer in the summer, but it wasn't so certain.
Mhm.
And I had this opportunity in the Swedish Hockey League pop up, which is outside of, like the NHL and Russia. It's probably the next best league in the world. You could argue the AHL maybe, but definitely a top league. And I was like, if I don't get an NHL deal, I'll get an AHL deal, probably starting the East Coast League on an AHL deal. So might as well take this, have a nice life experience, and see what comes of it. So that was kind of what took me out there. I just kind of followed my intuition on that, and it made sense given my options.
Yeah. And then was there any big difference from playing Division One college to that jump to Sweden at all?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, pro is a huge jump. You go from playing with all these guys your age first time, and then walk in the locker room. There's a 38-year-old on your team with kids like are walking around and can speak. So that's definitely different, and I'm so used to it now, having just finished my fourth year pro, and I love it. I think it's a nice lifestyle, and it's a hard one at times. And yeah, the level of play, it was a good jump for me because it was still a pretty I don't want to say familiar environment, but it was a inviting environment in Europe. They take care of you. It's a little bit more of that, especially in Sweden, that work comes second, life is first, family's first, and you're not getting traded and things like that so much. So going out there was nice because it had that pro feel and also was able to like ease me into the chaos of North American pro ice hockey where you're getting called up and sent down a million times, especially as a
Yeah.
goalie. And um, yeah, I think that was a really nice step for me to kind of, dip my toes in the water and also in the hockey side is such a good league. But also coming from the Big Ten, like it was nothing I felt like it was nothing I couldn't handle and our team was pretty good. We had a good coach and good structure. So as a goalie, it was nice to step into that role and feel like I could thrive off the bat.
Awesome. And you've also played like in the AHL with like Laval, and so you've had your exposure to different leagues. Is there any like big difference besides obviously like the NHL, and I know the KHL is pretty fast and skilled.
Yeah, they're all a little bit different. I'd say the AHL. AHL is a really great league and really underrated league. You could honestly say it's the second best league in the world. You could make that argument. It's got so many great players who have played so many NHL games, and the only difference is, it's a feeder league, so it's the top team in the NHL who owns the AHL team. They run it, so they're trying to get their prospects playing time, and it's not always about winning, which can be frustrating. And also as a goalie, that's a tough environment to be in because your team's not always so tight knit. Guys are getting called up and sent down and traded, and there's just not as much incentive to win in that league. It's more for on the development side. So, but at the same time, really great skilled league, and if you're playing there, you're definitely at a really high level. So that was an exciting thing.
Yeah. What would you tell young hockey players, young goalies, youth? What kind of advice would you give them trying to make maybe that next jump from tier two to tier one or tier one to juniors, or what would your advice be for them?
Yeah, I mean, I think honestly, it's completely different for each person. Everybody's wired so different. Some guys, like me at that age, I was overthinking everything, and I didn't have to be told to work harder when I was 16, 17. I was as dialed as they came, but I had to be, told to be patient and believe in myself and not overthink everything. So it's hard to give, advice to the whole, group of young athletes just because everybody's different. But there are themes right going on right now that I see in society and in our lives, and just as like hockey players, things that remain true to this day and were probably true when I was at that age 8 to 10 years ago. And I think especially today, it's so easy to get caught up in social media and distractions and all the expectations from parents and coaches and all these things. And you look back and you just realize none of it mattered. Like your journey's going to happen how it should. You're going to have good years. You're going to have bad years. You might retire when you're 35 or when you're 15, and it's all happening for a reason. If you look at it that way, you're going to learn something from everything, whether, like I said, you play hockey into pro or you take the lessons from hockey into your professional life. So as long as you're just, coming to work every day and giving your best effort and also taking everything with a grain of salt and having fun, like good things are going to happen. It's
Yeah.
when you start to stress and worry and look at what everybody else is doing. Because yeah, like I said, social media, it's just a little clip of a person's life. It's not all that they're going through. And myself included, like I look at things sometimes and compare myself, but my journey is my journey. And I'm not in the NHL right now, and I would love to be, but at the same time, I know that everything that's happened to me in the past couple of years has happened to get me to this spot, and I wouldn't have traded that for anything. So if you can adopt that mindset, it's a great place to play from, but to live from, and it also takes some time to get there, which I'm still working on that to this day.
Yeah, I think patience is huge, especially in hockey because you've probably seen it many times. I know I have, where the best player in Pee Wees is not usually the best player in midgets, right? So having that patience, taking advantage when the time comes, super important. So, is there anything different that you would do if you had to go back and navigate your journey again?
Yeah, nothing different I would do. Not to go off the cliche of no regrets, but I think, like I said, everything's happening for a reason. I needed each experience to push me in a certain way, whether it was a success or a failure. At times, you need these external validations to give you that confidence to keep moving on, and at times, you need to fall flat on your face to be humbled and learn a lesson that you can't really see so clearly at the time. So I'm truly a believer in that, and it's easy to say, I wish this would have gone better, or I got screwed here, or this coach did this to me, but you're just wasting your energy at that point. What is what is, and you can either take what's there and make something out of it, or you can sit back and complain. And to me, that's what makes the difference between the top athletes and the top people, or you know, everyone's given good and bad circumstances, and it's what you make of it.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it better myself, man. I know I hate that question because would you do anything different? Well, no, you're in the position you are. It is what it is, right? Is there anything you wish you knew, you know, growing up or earlier in your hockey career that might have, having a little bit more information on something might have helped you even more or kind of navigate anything?
Yeah, honestly, Ron, you just said it like a bit ago. It's that, the best players when you're in Pee-wees or even U16 or U18, they're not going to be the best players 5 years down the road. Everyone thinks they have it figured out. The parents think their kid's a star, their kid can't do it because they're this much smaller. And it's just not true. Like when I was that age, you thought you knew who were the top guys because they were in tier one and they made the selects teams, the national camps. And if you get too caught up in that, both on where you stand and looking at where other people stand, you're just wasting your energy. I think the thing I wish I told myself, and I believe I executed on it, but I didn't really understand it. It's just like go do the work every single day. And when I say work, I don't mean like grind yourself into the ground, like have fun with it and enjoy it. Um, but if you're too worried about the logistics of how it's going to work out, and you're kind of just wasting your time because when you're young, you have a lot of time still to develop. And if you're doing 5-10% extra than every single other person, or just being more detailed or doing something that they're not doing, it might not be extra work, then you can gain a lot of steps on those other people that might be ahead of you at whatever point you're at. So it's easy to get caught up in the now of who's at the top and who's at the bottom, but it all shifts around. And even from college to pro, I was guilty of thinking that like the best guys in college were going to be the NHL guys, and you see these guys be full-time NHL players that you were like, how the hell did that happen? We were all in the same place, or they were not even playing at this point, but everybody is a different point where they, hit their stride, and they're probably doing a lot of work behind the scenes to get to that point, and whenever that comes.
Yeah, awesome, dude. Great answer. Okay, Strauss, you have dinner with three goalies, dead or alive, and you're trying to just learn whatever. Who would you pick and why? Yeah.
Good one. Got to throw Henrik Lundqvist in there. My idol growing up. Throw in, I don't know. I want to say all the guys I know. Like I'm blessed to know some great goalies like Evgeny Nabokov, Steve Shields, Steve Valiquette. But now I'm over three. Um, it's hard to choose. I guess I'll put in people I don't know. It's Henrik Lundqvist. Could throw in Patrick Waugh just because arguably best of all time. Love to learn from him. And maybe someone current. Yeah, like I love UC Saros. He's a small guy making a difference right now, so I'd love to learn a little bit from him. Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess they'd consider you small being a goalie at 6 foot, right?
Yeah, exactly. They don't know my wingspan though. I got
Oh,
6'5" wingspan, but no one's asking me.
jeez. Awesome. Strauss, I appreciate your time, man. I know it's super busy off season. I know you prioritize a lot of your recovery and your training during this time. So I appreciate you coming on. Where can the people find you on the internet?
Um, yeah, I'm trying to be less on the internet these days at times, but definitely on my Instagram, which is just my name, Strauss Mann, and also doing, I'm not sure when this episode will go live, but we're running a summer program through our coaching platform called House, which is HAUS, and it's gonna be pretty fun. It's gonna be late June to mid-July, 4 sessions. Each session's gonna have a top tier coach of some sort and an NHL player on as guest speakers. My good friend Michael Kaplan and I, who are both pro hockey players, are going to co-facilitate it. And each session will have a different topic, and we'll kind of go into some different areas and help these youth hockey players, more on the older end, like 16 to 20, start to gain some edges in their game in their off season, and hopefully help some people. So if anyone's interested, you can check that out.
Awesome. That's all online.
Yeah, build your house, HAUS house.com.
Perfect. Awesome, Strauss. Thanks again for hopping on. I look forward to another conversation about your training and recovery and your nutrition. So appreciate you, man.
Thanks, Ryan.